I'm so excited to have Karla Trotman join us on the stage for the Small Biz Chat podcast. Karla, you and I have been friends for forever and a day, but this is the first time that you have actually been a guest on the Small Biz Chat podcast. So, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, so let's get into your backstory. You have such an interesting backstory. So, I want to know, how did you become the CEO of, first of all, what is Electrosoft and how did you become the CEO of Electrosoft?
Electro Soft is an electronics contract manufacturer. What is a contract manufacturer? It is, so think about it from the perspective of Apple. Apple, you have your iPhone. Apple does not have manufacturing facilities. In fact, they outsource their manufacturing to a company in Asia and they say, here are our drawings. We want you to build this product for us. We do the same thing, except we don't do commercial products. We're not building iPhones. We build electronics for industrial and defense applications. Primarily, we focus on what I call the brain and central nervous system of a device. So you open any device, you'll have a circuit board with all these parts in it, and then you'll have cables and wires, something powering it, and just generating power throughout. And that's what we build. We help our customers do the electronics, build the electronics for their devices. The company was actually started by my father and mother 38 years ago on the kitchen table. It was one of those accidental businesses where my father had the company decided to shut down instrumentation division. He was running manufacturing. He was writing software for blood analyzing equipment. The company said, we don't do that anymore. And he's home figuring out the next step. And someone says, hey, you know, manufacturing and cables, can you build these cables for me to help me out? He did it. They said they're great. And the next thing you know, we were in business.
Wow, wow. So your father ran the business for how long? Like when did you join the business? Because you didn't start out working for your family business. You went and did some other stuff.
I sure did. I sure did. So I started, I grew up working in the business, helping on the kitchen table, cut wire for 25 cents an hour with a ruler instead of wire cutters. In the garage, helping do things, help when we moved from building to building. I didn't really take it serious as a business because honestly, Melinda, as you know, we are not trained to think of small business as a viable career when you're young. You're
No.
told go to college, get that good degree so you can get that good paying job with those good benefits, and don't you ever quit. You all fight for the C-suite, and that's how you're going to make your living. And so when I see my family starting this little business, we don't have a giant skyscraper in the city. We're at one point in a car shop, doing circuit boards and running them through a machine. And I'm helping my dad. And I'm like, this is awful. We didn't have air conditioning. Like, you see your family building this business, you don't think that it could lead itself to generational wealth. In fact, generational wealth is never really even a discussion. It's just about like, we got to pay these bills, we got to ship it out. And I think it wasn't until I had gone to college. I was helping my dad with a project after school, after college, um, for the military. And I really just wanted to work in the field that I went to school for. I went to school for business logistics. I wanted to work in supply chain. But it wasn't until I would say it's been almost 16 years ago that I started working with my father side by side. I left corporate and said, hey, I want to run the family business. I started to realize what legacy was about. I had a small business on the side, a little e-commerce site, and that little e-commerce site, we had a global clientele and it had celebrities following. And I realized that small business really is an economic engine, and it caused me to shift gears. And shifting those gears, again, I worked with my dad for it was 16 years ago that I had left corporate. We worked side by side. I said, hey, I want to take over. He said, cool. 3 years, I'm out. That 3 years took 11 years. But in that time frame, so I had an on ramp, off ramp period with him. I had the period of training wheels. I had the opportunity to run crazy ideas past him and know that I wouldn't blow the whole thing up. We worked as partners. I was a trusted advisor. I could bring an idea and we could work it out as business partners in a sense. And 3 years before he transitioned out of the business, before I became the sole owner, I was running the company and it kind of in the background, and we didn't tell anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we made the announcement that Carla's now the sole owner and the president of the company, if you haven't noticed anything for the past 3 years, good, because she's been running it. So it kind of gave people that sense of like, yeah, she really knows what she's doing after that time frame. But it really was a long period, but I don't look at it in a poor way or in a sad way or upset way. How many people get the opportunity to work with a parent for a long portion of their life
Right.
and them really start to rely on you as a trusted source to help change the generational wealth and succession of the business.
I think that's an extremely important point to make. But now you've been at the helm a few years now. So
Mhm.
how have you brought sort of like your vision and your leadership style to the business? You're not your dad, right? You're a different kind of leader. And so I wanted to understand, how did you make that transition? Obviously still being deferential to him, but like now it's your ship. You're driving the bus, right? So
Yeah.
how did you make that transition?
It was kind of difficult for me because it was my own mental block. I knew the steps, I knew what needed to be done. I had the education, I had gone to graduate school and had gotten that good MBA. That doesn't show you how to run a business. It really, even if we did a lot of case study, and case studies run you through a lot of just situational things to see how you would think and what you would do, so that if you're ever in those situations or parallel to it, you kind of have an idea, framework, and how to work the problem. But it doesn't really cover family business, and it doesn't cover small business, and it's very different. So for me, it was the first thing I knew I had to do was create an advisory board. I had the whole team that reported to my dad, from the management side to bankers, lawyers, everyone. They were used to the way that he would run things, and I could never just run it my way if I was just seen as a replacement. So I had to create my own banking relationships, my own attorneys, my own advisory team. I We kept the management team, but there needed to be some augmentation because I'm thinking from a business perspective. He thinks from an engineering perspective. I think differently about culture than my father does. Now we have the same family oriented culture, but I'm more structured in a business sense. That fairness, I know how far fairness goes in business. I know how far, especially in a family business where the assumption is nepotism, which that's what it is. But they also want you to be qualified, and so they could trust you, because if they didn't trust you, they would leave.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Thankfully, people didn't leave, and I think part of it too was running it from the background, for and then people knowing me for so long and how dedicated I was. But also, I we spoke to our customers and let them know, hey, this is what's going to happen. Carla's going to be taking over. That's the plan. And the customers were relieved, because they're like, well, we like working with you. We don't want any, have to look for another supplier, and we like Carla. So it was that made the transition a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any moments of doubt though? Was there anybody that was just like, I'm not feeling Carla? You know what I mean? And you had to like make a
They didn't
hard
tell
decision, whether it was an employee or a vendor. Like, was there somebody who was like, I'm not dealing with that man's daughter? But like, was there anybody that sort of like gave you static and you had to kind of, I don't know, you had
I
to
think
figure out how you
there's
were gonna handle that?
the energy, is different because my father and I are so different.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest things that I think was helpful was bringing in an organizational psychologist. And that was suggested to me by a member of our board. And what they do is, I always call it like he's pretty much a therapist, but he helps you think of things from the perspective of the company. How do we create alignment? How do we get over this? Is this a deficiency in your training? Maybe we need to bring somebody in. And they really help smooth away all of the stuff that people kind of bring to work but don't express, or maybe they express it, but it comes out in a terrible way. Maybe it's an attitude, maybe it's in the way they do their work. And we worked, and that's attributable to culture as well, where people
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel that they had a voice. So for me, it was really important that we like each other in a sense. We don't have to be in love and hang out after work and like pull
Right.
each other's hair, but we have to respect one another, share information, and really be honest about how we feel about something because I'm relying on all of these people to help move this business forward. So that was hard because we didn't have it that way. I think it was a little bit dysfunctional, and which anytime when you have multiple generations going off of an old school way of operating,
Mm-hmm.
because as you know, culture has changed. The workforce of the future is very, very different than it was.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up in that change and people part of that change, I've been able to identify how I wanted the company to look. So the hard part for me was what did I want the company to look like and how do I get it there? And that org psychologist and the advisory board were so beneficial.
So tell me about family dynamics though, right? Because you have siblings, I think one of your brothers worked in the business. So tell me about how hard that was because I used to work with my former spouse and I think working together almost, kind of finished killing our relationship. So tell me about some of the family dynamics as you sort of like took over the business or how you handled hard decisions related to family members that work for you.
Family dynamics, yes. So originally the goal was all three of us, me and my two younger brothers, would take over the business. One of the things my father always told me was that you go into business with people who have something to offer. And I thought this would be great. My one brother is really smart when it comes to IT and our devices and programming our robotics. The other is very much a hands on mechanical person, so he can help run the production floor, and I'll take over the front and do all the business. What wound up happening is that I saw that we had three different layers of dedication. There is the yes, it's our family business. I'm dedicated to the family. Then it's like this is a job that I have to come in and I got to do it. And then there was the dedication of I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it work. Um, and I felt that I was the only one doing whatever it would take to make it work. Everyone else was kind of like treating it as a job or an obligation. When I realized those things, I said to my parents, well, also another thing happened. I failed to mention when you think about succeeding your business from one generation to the next, it is a taxable moment. It's not like you think it is on TV where I gave my dad $1 and then he transitioned the business, or that he gifted it to me in some way. We hadn't been doing stock transfers over the year, which is also a way to do it, but that's not what we had done. What had needed to happen was that in the time frame we were allotted, we have to take a giant loan out pretty much and then do some other things to make it transition because it's a taxable moment. I wound up having to use all of my assets because you need to take out a loan from the bank. And the bank interviews you, looks through your financials, looks at your business, just combs through your life and says, yes, we believe that you will pay us back. And because of my position of having a lot of assets, because I had a whole career before this, because I had the education, because I had the corporate experience, they believed that I would be able to do it, but I would have to lead, everything would be on me to run the company. And when I thought about that, people go into business with people that have something to offer, I looked and said, they're not really coming in. I'm always here, all of my assets, and yet they have 66% of the voting power.
Mm.
Like, how does that work? And then at the end of the year, the net, they get 66% of that. And the liens are all on my assets. How does that work?
Yeah.
Like, how do I go into this deal and not hate myself? Right? How do
Mhm.
I not become bitter towards them, feeling that I had to make the sacrifice and no one else did? So I suggested when my parents pushed back and said, no, this is supposed to be a third, a third, a third. I said, well, then why don't you cut the company up into three pieces? And everybody's financially responsible for their own division. They're like, well, they can't do that. I said, exactly. So why is it that it's my obligation, it's my cross to bear? And we really were at an impasse for a number of years. It took 3 years for us to go through that process. So there were a little bit of hard feelings, but in the end, my dad was like, "You're absolutely right. Why should you put forth all of the risk and only be left with a third?" And we even talked about super shared, for super voting rights. Um, and to me, I still didn't think that was enough. So I do most of the work and get a portion of it. What if we get a nice net sum at the end? And I was like, "Hey guys, we need to reinvest in this equipment, buy a building, do something." And they're like, "Well, I was going to buy a house. I need that money for this house. Or I was planning on doing XYZ, or just no."
Mm-hmm.
They vote against me. How do I have a controlling interest in and have all of the risk and very little reward? So my
Yeah.
parents did decide, you're right. You're right. You should be the owner of the business. But that didn't cause any issues because they were able to even it out with other assets in their estate. I just happened to be living and breathing, and they were living and breathing during the time of the transition of this portion of the estate.
Got it. Got it. So they were still able to make your siblings whole without them feeling like, oh wow, you guys just gave the most valuable asset to her, you know.
Mhm.
And I recognize that that's that's totally family drama, but I'm glad that you guys worked through it and you're still a family, right? You know, because sometimes that happens and then nobody comes to Thanksgiving, right? You know, like that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Very real.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. Well, now I want to switch gears with you a little bit because you wrote this little book that I am so excited about. Dark, Dirty, and Dangerous:
Yes.
The Vibrant Future of Manufacturing. Now, your company is considered an advanced manufacturer, right?
Yes. Yes.
So talk to me about this book and what was the key message in it that you wanted people to learn?
Well, so it was not my dream to write this manufacturing book. Honestly, when I looked around for other mentorship within advanced manufacturing, I couldn't find anyone that looked like me. Now, they didn't necessarily have to look like me, but I was curious to know if there were. And I even asked suppliers, customers, and they said no, they've never really met any a black woman, or a black family running electronics manufacturing company in advanced manufacturing. And my voice was always requested or at the table. What do you think? What do you think? And so it just felt like it was time to talk about it, but I didn't want it to be a boring manufacturing book. So I wanted to overlay um, a story of a Black family in a very unique position that happens to be manufacturing. But I also wanted to leave little breadcrumbs for folks who wanted to follow us. And not necessarily in a manufacturing, but high barrier to entry industries who did not understand family business and how it worked because they would like to have a family business.
Hmm.
Who thought that, oh well, it's just so easy because they were educated and people just gave them money. No, we had the same systemic issues, and I needed to talk about it. I needed to, give the behind the kimono view of what it's like to be Black in business. And even if you're a successful business, that it's still a struggle. We just happen to be in a struggle for 38 years at this point. Um, the book was about building authority in the field and standing out. The book, I wanted it to be a gift so that my 16-year-old could read it easily and say, I got an idea of the direction I need to be in. And it was important. We had this saying in our family when it comes to the business: if you can see it, you can be it. We didn't obviously create that, but it's like our mantra in a sense. My father, when he graduated from high school out here in the suburbs of Philadelphia, was told as a young man who was talented in math and science, that he could either become a teacher or go into the military. Those were his options for jobs. So he picked the military, and here he is, 18, overseas, fighting Vietnam War, ends up on deployment on the continent of Africa, where he meets a Black electrical engineer, an Ethiopian engineer. Never met one that looked like him in his life, never even knew that was a possible career, and changed the entire trajectory of my family. That's when he decided to go to college and study electrical engineering. That's when he used his talents to create a life for us to create this business. My mother saw in him, like, he followed her to school. So, it took a good woman for him to go to school. He follows her there and decides to go into electrical engineering. And she held the family down while he built this company. And so there's a story of partnership in that book. There's a story for us, again, back to our family. If you can see it, you can be it. So this book is part of it, showing you that you can be capable and do it. We did it. There's nothing super special about us. We just This is just I would say, a little bit of a roadmap, and give you an idea, some inspiration on how to get there. And we talk about succession planning a little bit. We talk about generational wealth and how small business is the pathway, and family business is the lifeblood of global businesses, and that we hope others can follow suit.
Definitely, but I want to dig into the generational wealth piece of this for a second, because the whole point of why we do any of this, right, is so we can live how most people can't, right? So talk
Yes.
to me about the generational wealth and the things that you're talking about and thinking about, because I think you made a point at the top of this interview that it's not just about this business, it's about generational wealth for your family, for your children.
Yes.
And so can you talk a little bit about how intentional you've been in your business, and even in how you structured the business financially to create generational wealth?
Absolutely. So for me, when I talk about generational wealth, I to not turn people off, there's levels to this, right? So I'm not talking about Rockefeller, Vanderbilt level of wealth. That's, we want that, obviously. But the generational wealth we're talking about from a very basic rudimentary level, let's talk about the fact that we as a Black community are having GoFundMe funerals. Let's talk about the fact that, grandma's house is not clear in title, and we got to figure out all this stuff, and she passed away. We don't know who owns what. Oh, and this cousin rolls up from somewhere, and now they're part owner. How do we do this? What is probate? Why do we have to go through this now? Because there's no free title, no free clear title, or there's no will, or the will is written on a piece of loose leaf paper that she tucked away in a drawer. We need to not think of generational wealth as a Rockefeller. We need to think of it as just doing regular basic things, like a simple will, like putting things in a simple trust. That's a little half a step up, so that you don't have to go through an expensive, long, excruciating, argumentative period of fighting over something that it will be left with very little at the end. A life insurance policy, a burial insurance policy, something that will allow the next generation to not start in the negative. Now, as small business owners, we have the opportunity to have our children on payroll. Now, when they're on payroll, what are they doing? They're paying into Social Security. They have the opportunity to open a Roth IRA. They can put that money into a 529 account. That is payroll. So that's pre taxed money for you as a corporation, and you're able to allow them to grow their generational wealth where you're not paying out of pocket for college, or now you can use that for private school, taking out $10,000 a year. Now, mind you, like, disclaimer, I am not an attorney, I am not a taxist, I am not an accountant. I am just sharing with you details of how we as business owners, how small businesses tend to benefit from the laws that are written for small business. So again, on that very rudimentary areas level, it's about taking care of the basic things: insurance, burial insurance, titling, wills, making sure that everything is in place for you when you have your untimely demise, or helping your grandmother or mother and father to get to that point. I know it's hard for them to talk about it, but this was for my family. When my family talked about succession planning, it was up here. It was not a plan that was executed out on paper. So I had to help them create that so that we could successfully move on. I've had friends who have family businesses. Dad was sick, stepmamas that put the business in my name. Thankfully, they were able to get the succession plan through, and father passed 2 months later. Had they not, the mess that
Mm.
would have happened ensued because of that.
Yeah.
Like when you have siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles, it becomes, he said, she said, this paper, that paper. Get your house in order. That's how we create generational wealth. It's starting, even if that extra $10,000, so somebody can get out of their debt or help them get to start at least a neutral position, because we always, as a community, end up starting a negative. So for
Right.
me, I'm sorry.
No, no, I'm amen choiring you, but I guess my as we wrap this up, what is the legacy that you hope to live through your business, the legacy that you hope to leave for your family, as you build this empire that you're building.
Well, I don't want my kids to think that they have to work at Electrosoft. I don't want them to have the same feelings that my brothers had felt, that they had to be here. So we're setting it up as an asset, something that they own, where we hire people to run the company and they know how to run the business or own a business as an owner. That we have other assets and they look at their portfolio of assets and understand the financials. They have a board of advisors that they believe in. There's a fiduciary board that's running things for them. So I want to leave a legacy of asset ownership. And I want them to be able to, I'm not trying to retire them. I want them to still have a career and a life, but I want them to realize that my parents started something that allowed their grandchildren to eat. And now it's my job to do the same, and it will be their job to continue that tradition.
I love it. I love it. All right, what's the best business advice anyone's ever given you?
Again, back to what my dad said, don't go into business with people who don't have anything to offer. And that's for everything, every business relationship, every organization you join. Like your time is valuable. How you spend your time on this earth, it doesn't have to be a business. It could be how you spend your time on the weekend, who you spend your time with. Don't spend it with people who don't have anything to offer you.
That's it. That's it. Well, thank you so much, Karla. That was such good information. And when we come right back, we're going to talk more about how to build a business and stay in business over the long haul. You're watching the Small Biz Chat podcast, and we will be right back.
Are you ready to turn your dreams of entrepreneurship into a reality? Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, the Small Biz Lady, and I want to invite you to check out smallbizladyacademy.com. We're here to help you every step of the way with our comprehensive training programs and expert resources. You'll learn how to start and grow a successful business that aligns with your passions and your goals. From business systems to sales strategies, we cover it all. Plus, our supportive community of fellow women business owners is here to cheer you on and provide guidance when you need it. Don't wait any longer to pursue your dreams. Join smallbizladyacademy.com today. We build businesses and we help you build the life you've always wanted.